Hi friends, it's Grace and welcome back to another video. First of all, my apologies for the completely unplanned 2-week hiatus. Honestly, life has just been very busy, like my personal life and working a lot, and nothing to be concerned about in my personal life, just the fact that a lot has been happening. There's been a lot of things that I've had to go to, lots of exciting things happening in my friends' lives and mine and my family's. And the other thing is, last weekend I brought home this little cutie. Her name is Maisie and she is about 6 months old, or just a little bit less than 6 months. And she's squirmy, but she's naturally been taking up a bunch of my time as I've tried to make her transition as smooth as possible and her as comfortable as possible in my house. But she's definitely mischievous and very adorable. And she looks very interested in my ring light tripod, so let's just hope that there's no sabotage and knocking over of my camera during this video. So with that said, this is going to be my October wrap-up for everything that I read last month. And it was a very good reading month in terms of the amount of things that I got finished, because I actually finished 8 books, and that's definitely above average for me. One of them was an audiobook and 7 of them were physical books. And then in terms of rating, those were pretty good as well, because I had 3 5 stars, 3 4 stars, a 3.5 star, and a 3 star. So I think what I'll do is I will start with the bottom of the list in terms of rating, and then I will work my way up to my favorites of the month. And even the 3 star was not a bad 3 star. Bit of a weird 3 star though, so I'll start with that one. So the first book to talk about my 3 star rating for the month of October is Cursed Bunny by Bora Chung. And this book definitely has a journey attached to it, because I was so interested in this. It's one of those books where it's almost like I just had set my mind to it. I was going to read it, I wanted to find it, but I wanted to buy it in the UK when I was there visiting Ben in August. And we scoured London and none of the chain bookstores had it in stock. This book did not exist in the city of London. We couldn't find it anywhere we went. And then we finally found it at an independent bookshop, which was amazing, and I was so excited, and I bought a copy of it. And then of course, after all this whole journey, it ended up not working that well for me, at least overall. So it's almost of course that would happen, but I don't regret the finding of it. I had fun. So this is a collection of short stories that are horror, sci-fi, surrealist, and this is translated from, I believe it's Korean. So this is translated from Korean into English by Anton Her, who is a Swedish author. And so this collection was honestly very disturbing and unsettling and graphic in a lot of ways, and some of these stories are absolute nightmare fuel, and I know that that's on purpose. So that's not exactly a criticism. It's really not a criticism of the book itself. It's just a mismatch between the book and me, because I didn't really connect with the tone of a lot of these stories, even when the ideas were super cool. I found myself being horrified and unsettled, but without the accompanying satisfaction of the story. And I think that that's where it fell off for me. The 3 stars for this definitely acknowledges that despite my tastes, I still recognize what the stories in here were doing, although I do think that they were stronger at the beginning and they fell off a little bit towards the end. So I think that if this had been organized differently and the stories were in a different order, it could have stayed a little bit stronger throughout. But on the whole, only a few of them were memorable to me. The first 2 stories are 2 of those, and the title story, Cursed Bunny, is also memorable for me. But aside from that, I haven't really thought about this too much after finishing it. And so on the whole, it just wasn't to my taste. The prose is very like straightforward and somewhat simple, and it didn't really allow me to dive into character feelings. It felt more like being told a tale, like a fairy tale through a verbal medium. Like, it was kind of like, well, the character did this, and then they did this, and I don't know, I feel like other people might really connect with this a lot more than I did. There were just a variety of factors that were preventing me from it. So 3 stars for Cursed Bunny, unfortunately. Now, my 3.5 star read for the month of October and the one audiobook that I listened to was A Psalm for the Wild-Built by Becky Chambers. And I know that a lot of people love this. I think that it just on some level didn't work with me. I saw someone in another review say, maybe I'm too cynical for this world that's being put forth here. And maybe that's what it is, because that statement resonates with me a little bit. Like, this world that we're exploring in this first entry in the Monk and Robot series is very wholesome, and while I liked the character like challenges, the internal challenges that were being explored, it's definitely more of an internal conflict than it is any sort of external conflict. It was almost too wholesome in a way where I was not connecting with the emotional struggles that the character was having. I was not connecting to them. Although I did think that they were a very interesting character. Well, our first character that we're introduced to, sibling Dex, and then we have the later introduction of the robot character. So we have 2 like friendly characters interacting with each other and learning about each other's worlds, and I think that there's a lot to like about it in terms of it being cozy and nice to read, but I guess it just I didn't have time to connect, I didn't have time to sink into it. But then on the other hand, if this was very long instead of short, I may have DNF'd it, because I enjoyed the ending and the like philosophical questions and answers that were being talked about at the end. But the middle was a little bit boring for me, and I know that if that had stretched out very long, instead of this being only a 4-hour audiobook, there's a good chance that I would have just said, I can't finish this, it's not working for me. So I almost feel a little bit bad, because there's nothing really bad to say about this. Like, it's a very sweet story. It just didn't do it for me. Okay, so next up we have the 4-star reads, and there are 3 of them like I mentioned earlier, and I really don't feel like I can put these in any particular sort of order because they're all quite different from one another, so I'm just gonna talk about them in the order that I have them on my pile. So first up we have Thud by Terry Pratchett, and this is a step down. See, the thing about this book is that it's a step down from Night Watch, but Night Watch being the 6th book in the series, naturally something has to follow it, but Night Watch is without a doubt my favorite and the best book in the series, and I knew, even reading it knowing that there were 2 more books left, nothing was going to unseat it. And I think that this suffers a little bit because of that, because it had to follow Night Watch, but at the same time, I really enjoyed certain aspects of this book, but in some ways I really felt like in the first half of Thud, we were retreading old ground. Like conversations that in this series, in previous books, he has already had about the culture of Ankh-Morpork the city and the composition of the Watch and who is joining it and how different species interact with each other, and like what the dwarves are like in the city versus the dwarves that are in their home country. And there's a lot in here that like it is expanded upon, but at first it feels very much the same. And so the overall plot, where we end up going, like the end brought this up for me to a 4-star from like maybe a 3.5 or something like that. So the plot ends up being good, and a lot of that has to do with Sam Vimes and his family and his son and who he is as a person, because this is a continued exploration of who he is. But like, well, it's been through the whole series, but Night Watch was very much a standout book for him, and so we're continuing that into Thud. But for my personal taste, I think that that intent and that storyline should have been emphasized and made clearer a little bit earlier on in the book, because at the start of this book, like I said, I was like, why are we doing the same things again? And it took me a while to realize that it was different. And if it had been a little bit more obvious earlier that it was different, maybe the whole thing would have come together better for me. But with that said, like, this was still really fun to read. Me and Ben always read these together, and so that increases my enjoyment too, because we definitely always have a good time reading them together. The next 4-star, and this was the book club pick for the month of October in mine and Ben's Discord, as well as being very appropriate just as a spooky read, was The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. And this was just so interesting because I know that people have said that it's different from the TV show, and I have not seen the TV show. I'm a big baby when it comes to like horror movies and stuff like that, so I will not be watching the TV show. But I was still interested in reading the book because I get a lot less scared when I'm reading, or rather, I prefer that type of psychological unsettlement than I do like a jump scare. I hate them so much, I can't do it. And a book can't give you a jump scare, at least not in the same way. So this is basically the story of the main character, Eleanor, who is called to ask if she wants to come to Hill House and be part of an experiment with this doctor who wants assistance in basically recording all of the phenomenon that they experience when staying in Hill House and determining whether it is in fact haunted or not. And so Eleanor, along with one other person and a member of the family who owns the house, they all come to stay at Hill House, and so that makes a total of 4 people initially, them and the doctor conducting this like experiment. And it's basically about their experiences there and about the unsettling nature of the house and the psychological effects on our main character Eleanor and her relations with the other people in the house and her own insecurities, and it definitely spirals from there into being a psychological thriller type of novel. And the ending is weird and surreal and dreamlike, and I enjoyed it, but I also didn't really know what to make of it a lot of the time, so I could definitely see myself rereading this in the future. I did enjoy it quite a bit because I went into it not really knowing what to expect and what it was going to be like, and then I ended up really enjoying the style. The third 4-star from the month of October, and this is a book that honestly I had trouble rating and I still am not entirely sure how I feel about it, is The Obelisk Gate by N.K. Jemisin. And the reason this is tough for me is because I flew through this just like I did with the 5th season because her writing is so readable for me. I really like the prose, I really like the way she writes. I like the perspectives that she chose in this book. It was definitely an interesting progression from the first one to here. You expand a lot about what you learned in the first book, but while in the 5th season I felt like I had a handle on what was going on, in this one I really didn't. There are introductions of factions in a conflict, and the motivations seem so blurred, and like I get that in real life it's gonna be hard, like it's not gonna be clear cut. Like I think that this is a really probably good representation of how groups in conflict with each other aren't necessarily going to be a monolith. They're not gonna all share the same views and motivations, but with that being said, it honestly was very confusing for me, and because it's so readable and I read it so fast, ended up going through these scenes without really having time to process them and work them out and figure out like what was going on and what the implications were of things that we were learning. So I finished this book and I had this feeling like, well, what the heck actually just happened? But anyway, I think my main hope here is that in The Stone Sky, the conclusion to this trilogy, some of these things that I'm confused about are going to be a little bit more clear when the plot threads start coming together, and they're not going to feel so much like they're just going over my head, because that's what I felt like for the conclusion of this book. And so that's why I'm not sure, like, I rated it 4 stars because of my personal experience, but the thing is I still think that the book's really, really good. So maybe upon reread that will change, and I'm just going to continue with The Stone Sky at some point soon. All right, we are finally here at the 5-star reads for the month of October. So first on the pile, and this was my patron pick for the month of October, that was, I believe, picked by both Victor and Andras. I could be wrong about that since it's been like a month and a half at this point since the time I did that draw or wheel spin. But I'm pretty sure this was chosen by 2 people regardless. And that is Before They Are Hanged by Joe Abercrombie, which finally had me continuing with the First Blot trilogy after like a year. It was about time, and it's not that I haven't wanted to read these, it's just that I haven't intentionally like made space for it, and so apparently I just really needed somebody externally to motivate me. And this was phenomenal. I certainly did not remember everything about The Blade itself, even while I was reading it, and when I finished The Blade itself, I didn't have a clear picture of the political structure and how everything like works in terms of rank-wise in this world. And so when I started this, I was a little bit concerned about that. But I think based on the separation of characters and just the situations that they're in this book, it allows you a little bit more time to orient yourself and definitely like figure out who is significant and what kind of power they hold, and like they're set more definitive plots and quests in this book for sure than in The Blade itself. And I absolutely loved the plots that they were set. Like the character arcs that the characters were on in this book were phenomenal. I love Joe Abercrombie's writing style, the character voices, like internally and the actual on-page dialogue, all of it is phenomenal. Like this has everything that I love in fantasy. Just all wrapped up in one book, and I'm really, really hoping that The Last Argument of Kings is that good for me as well, because like this has the quests, it has battles, it has like isolated groups going on their own journey and then meeting up with others, and then you have like sieges, and you have political maneuvering, and you have like heroics, and you have all, like honestly, you have all of that stuff, and it was so good. So thank you for making me read this, and for making me read Last Argument of Kings too in November, because yeah, I'm so glad. I'm so sad that I took such a long break because I loved this. Next up, and this is actually the first book that I finished in the month of October, is Babel by R.F. Kuang. And so I said in my dedicated review for this book, which I have up on the channel, that I was hovering somewhere in between 4.5 and 5 stars for this. And so it definitely deserves its spot in the 5 stars, since I'm not sure, like, but it was phenomenal either way. And the thing about this is that it is a little bit of a complex concept and setup, so I think I will direct you to my dedicated review if you're interested in hearing more about this book. But it just is such a fascinating exploration of translation and linguistics and colonialism, and how magic as the seat of power can very much like exacerbate those attributes like of a country and allow them the power to do terrible things to others, and like basically looking at the impact that that would have on real world history if it existed. And so I think that this is a super ambitious and intricate book, and it's obviously very personal to R.F. Kuang because of the passion you can tell that she put into this, and you can tell that it has much to do with her real world research and her graduate studies, just because of how much she clearly knows and how well researched this is. So I like hugely respect it. I thought that it was amazing. The themes remain stronger to me than the like plot and characters, although I really did like the characters. They represented a lot of things, but for me it was like the overall plot and things that she wanted to say and the themes that stand out and stick with me from this book. And I would definitely recommend it if you like history, linguistics, language, translation, etc. I think you'll really enjoy this. Okay, and then my final 5-star book for the month, which is a definite change of pace from the fantasy, is I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jennette McCurdy. And I said in my Goodreads review that it does feel a little bit weird putting a star rating on a book like this, like rating someone's intimate writings about their own life, but my 5-star rating is basically reflective of the fact that I think that it is presented as such a great book and that she did such a great job with it. And so going into this, I mean, a ton of people have read it now. It's obviously one of the most popular releases in the entire world, or at least the English-speaking world, of the past few months. But I still think it's important to say that you should look into the trigger warnings for this book if you have ever struggled with EDs in any significant manner. I don't blame the way that Jennette McCurdy wrote about her own experiences at all, but I do think that the content in here would have greatly differing effects on different people. And so definitely like decide whether it's safe for you before you pick this up. I really appreciated the wry and cynical voice that she uses throughout this. And a lot of the things that she is describing are so messed up. And when you're through with this, honestly, my big takeaway was just like pride for her journey and how the like young Jennette depicted in this book has had a really tough road and a lot of struggles to grow up into the woman that she is today, where she's finally on a healthy path for herself. And I think that that's all I'll say, because I don't want to dive too gratuitously into the things that she describes in here. I don't really want to put my own voice on it. I really think that you have to experience it in her voice yourself if you think that this is something you'll be comfortable reading. But I have huge respect for it. So that is it. Those are the things that I read in the month of October. 8 books all in all. So a really good month for me. And let me know in the comments what you read in the month of October, what you think of the things that I read, whether you agree with me or not on what you thought of them. And so that is going to be it for this one. Please like this video if you liked it. Subscribe if you would like to see more content from me. I post videos every Monday and Thursday. And as always, I will have my Discord, socials, and Patreon linked in my description if you're interested in any of that stuff. And with that said, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Bye!